going to start with our business leaders and start with what was the primary motivation for you or your company in offering work-friendly benefits? We'll get the details a little bit more of what they're offering in a moment, but just sort of speak to the motivations of what that was. Seppi, can we start with you?
Yes, first I want to thank you for inviting me, and I apologize to everybody since you've been here since 8 o'clock in the morning and have to now listen to more. So, and I don't have a good joke. I would have used it, but no, they could. As I was sitting there looking at the research, I was thinking that the reason, the bottom line reason that we offer family-friendly policies because we want to create a better world. It is just at the bottom line, and that's all you have to tell people. It's not that, yes, if you have a lactation room, somebody who's not breastfeeding or if they don't have children, but the way I articulate it, and as a part of our culture, is that our goal is to create a better world. And if you look at last night I was looking at the Super Bowl advertisement, I don't know how many of you paid attention to how they were connecting their product to a better world. So there was a beer, the one that got my attention, I didn't even pay attention good enough, but the beer was connecting to the clean water, right, if you drink. So I think we live in a time that is the most important topic we have to talk about, and that resonates with the millennials who don't have children and with everybody who says, do I want to pay more for foster care, or do I want to pay now to create a better world so we don't have to have more children in trouble, youth in trouble, social services that are affecting us. So, to me, it's a very simple logic, and it makes a lot of business sense.
Thank you. Fara?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, and I think when we think of our company is very focused on improving health and well-being of people in the state. So when we think of that as our mission, as our core mission, you want to make sure that your workforce is aligned to that. So we spend a lot of time thinking about how we can improve their health and well-being, and family-friendly benefits, aside from they're the right thing to do, you have to think through what really is the motivation. And it isn't just about child care and thinking about people that are getting parental leave because they're starting out. You have to think about the full workforce. So that's obviously the first motivation. Wow.
Thank you.
Bringing down the house.
I never have turned the lights out.
Exactly.
Here's the joke. That was good. Okay. The second thing is clearly we're trying to attract and retain talent. This is a highly competitive environment, and when I think about our organization even 15 years ago and the perception and the brand that you have from an employer standpoint, we are competing with very, very impressive companies. So how do we make sure we're able to continue to compete, attracting and retaining talent? So we're constantly evaluating what is it that we offer to be in that competitive environment.
Great. What about you, Andy?
My story, I think, is a little different. Rich, you were scratching me exactly where I itch with all the data. I'm a former academic and had spent, I guess, about 15 years in HR. This is in the 1990s, and I went back and got my PhD. And the topic I chose, or the kind of the focal research area, and I spent about 12 years doing it, was really isolating the impact. If the employer takes a perspective that the relationship is something beyond simple economic exchange. That there's a reciprocal relationship. You commit to them, and they will commit to you in turn, or offer greater service to your customers, offer greater effort on the job, et cetera, and stick around longer and drive down turnover numbers and all those kind of things. So I spent 12 years of my life really pursuing that question. Could we isolate that in a rigorous empiric way, that relationship? And in fact, it's there. So we know that, or our understanding of that in very pragmatic return on investment terms is coming around and is really developing quite nicely, frankly. So when I came back into industry, I came armed with all this understanding that, hey, listen, it is a moral imperative. We are citizens. We are corporate, we offer corporate citizens in the communities we operate, but it's a happy coincidence because to do the right thing is also to do the most profitable thing over time. And so I entered the workforce or returned to industry with that mindset. And I was very fortunate to land inside of a company that has, and I think every organization kind of has a kind of a guiding ethos, and theirs was very family-centric. So then it became easier to begin to think about, we had kind of a receptive audience and a receptive management team to hear those arguments. And they were only happy to learn that it is, in fact, a profitable thing to do as well. So.
I love how you frame that, the happy coincidence. So we know it's a good thing to do. It's good in terms of making the world a better place, which we're seeing, as you said, a lot of brand marketing around that concept, and that there's a real business outcome that you're seeing at Blue Cross and that you have actually studied and can point out. So I'm going to turn a minute then to you, Napoleon, and say, in supporting employees who are re-entering the workforce, what are you seeing in terms of benefits that they see as critical for their success?
So I start out by saying in addition to doing the work that I do every day with the Department of Commerce, I also am the parent of 2 young women, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. I call them women intentionally because they run our house.
Of course they do.
But my wife and I recently dealt with this sort of issue of how do you return back to the workforce, some of the stresses that it caused, and really the need for having kind of effective as well as effective family-friendly policies in the workplace. I think that one thing that I just want to call out is really mirroring the note that you made earlier, the Chamber of Commerce, U.S. Chamber of Commerce made. When we think about family-friendly policies at Commerce, the way we're really approaching it is from a workforce perspective. I mean, when folks come to the state of North Carolina, when we're attracting folks, we're trying to grow businesses here, folks are trying to grow a business here, and they're talking to us, they want to hear about incentives, infrastructure, taxes, that sort of stuff. But talent really is at the top of the list. And the way that we're looking at this is we do a lot of programming for other groups that are entering the workforce, re-entering the workforce. For the DWS team that I oversee, we have 81 workforce offices across the state, and then 23 workforce development boards that we're working with. And across those groups, we are working with veterans, ex-offenders, youth, all different categories. But this is a category that seems to be left out of the box a little bit. And we see it as being so critical. I mean, you really can't overstate the economic impact that it's able to have. And when we're looking at the type of, labor shortage, I guess you would say, that we're facing right now, having better policies that can enable people to stay in the workforce and to keep them interested in participating in the workforce, we see as critical.
Great. So let's get into the details a little bit then about what types of policies. Can you tell us about what are the family-friendly benefits that you're offering or your companies are offering to employees? And I want to share that as a result of this work, we're making changes as well, and we're a small nonprofit. We have 3 full-time employees and 2 part-time employees, and I'm proud to say we now have 12 weeks of paid maternity and paternity leave, and so we're thrilled about that, and partly inspired by the leadership of folks like you on the panel. So tell us a little bit about what you all are doing.
Sure, I can start.
Go ahead, Fara.
So we were sitting there a few minutes ago looking at Tracy's brochure that's on your table, and I opened it up and I flipped through it and I thought, this is so cool. When you're immersed in it, you don't realize, I know we do some really cool things, but when I opened the book and read pretty much every single thing in that book, we do offer. So we do have 12 weeks paid parental leave, which we instituted last January, so it's just been about a year. We do have an on-site backup child care center, which I think is really one of the most exciting benefits because it really does help many, many people in our organization. So lots of our employees always get excited and come talk to me about, can't we have a full-time child care center? And the answer continues to be, much to their dismay, no, simply because it would be an enormous child care center, given how many young families we have. And this really does allow families to be supplemented in the event of their own child care falling through. But if you take that and you go the flip side, the other end of the spectrum, we do have backup elder care as well. Because again, the workforce is not just young families. And I mean, we talked a lot about young employees, but there are many, many employees that are dealing with being in the sandwich generation, which is extremely complex and difficult to deal with. So as I tell many of our staff, when you're having babies and you're dealing with the 3-year-olds and the 1-year-old, you think that is the craziest time of your life. And then you find out, no, not so much. It's going to get even much more complicated than that. And I think it's our role to think about the entire workforce. So we have on-site fitness centers, on-site wellness centers. So we are blessed because we have been focusing on this for quite a while. And I would say, like other wonderful CEOs in the area, we have had wonderful leadership that has been very supportive of this. Our former CEO as well as our current CEO, who is, as I said earlier, dealing with a young family. And the really exciting thing was when he joined the company, he said, I want to be home for dinner with my kids. So that's also changing the mindset of leadership in the company. So that's another exciting thing. So I'll let others talk.
Did he say he's going to cook the dinner or he was
He's going to pick it up on the way home.
But I have got many, many texts and emails saying, I am on dad duty, and he's got 4 little ones between the ages of 2 and 9. So that is just, he's setting an example for other parents in the company to make that okay, to not necessarily answer that email that isn't a crisis. So I'll let others share.
So when I started my career, I didn't have children, but later on I had children. So throughout my career, I have 2 wonderful kids that I'm very proud of. They're grown, and so I had to balance the 2, and I quite never had that much family-friendly work environments. So when I started my business, I had a lot of flexibility. That was a huge part of being the CEO. When we were very small, I had a lot of flexibility with the kids' schedule when I went and came and picked them up. And so I decided to, we're about over 300 employees, so we're not anything as large as Blue Cross Blue Shield, but we are offering a lot of flexibility. That's a big part of attraction. And I try to always remember what was so important to me as a working mom. Working outside the home mom, because all of moms are working. So it was very important to have the flexibility, the time off. We have a rich time off. When employees start with us, we give them 3 weeks time off, and after 1 year, they get 4 weeks. And after 5 years, they get 5 weeks. So we have a rich paid time off. And then we have the paternity and maternity leave and flexible spending. We don't have we have a paying for the gym membership, for the health care. What we need to work on, what I was actually thinking when Fara was talking, is the child care. We don't give money towards child care or offer that right now, but we have everything else in the handbook we offer. And we are always looking to do it better and more creative, and flexibility of if they can work from home or if they need to be in the office, or what are the various ways that we can support them to also give back to their families.
Great. Andy?
I don't really have anything to add in terms of policies, standing policies. I'll offer a couple thoughts. For me, I think the lines blur pretty quickly. So as an example, if you have a young woman working on one of our manufacturing lines who expresses an interest in getting her degree, her associate's degree, our support for that through the tuition reimbursement program, our protection of our health insurance benefits against significant pressure to pass cost on to employees, training and development opportunities. I think there's a whole lot of things that go into caring for the entire employee, which has that impact on the employee. So for us, it's kind of it's a broad exploration at all times in terms of how do we continue to create an environment in which people feel cared for, in which people feel like their well-being is as important as their contribution or the things that they're making or the reports that they're filing that day. But we have the fitness center. We actually have one under construction, and we just literally on January 1st put the maternity and paternity policy into place, which is 12 weeks, and did some other things that formalize it. But I think, and I'd be curious to hear the panelists' reaction here. When you're as big as Blue Cross, right, and you're 300 employees, we're 750 in the U.S. When you're 750, 300, you have some flexibility and you can manage things informally. So if there's a snow day, and Pitt County schools cancel schools. Any Pitt County folks in here? Yeah, they cancel school at a forecast over there, and they canceled for 3 days. So that we welcome the kids on site. You know what I mean? So we'll show movies. We'll find an office or a conference room that we can kind of all pile them in. But it's a matter of, but that's very informal. And what and this is my question maybe. For Blue Cross is, how do you manage that at 10,000 employees or 30,000 employees? I think it becomes a challenge as you grow and there's increasing pressure to convert these things to a piece of paper that reads the rules and regulations and policies associated with it.
Yeah, that is definitely a challenge. There's no doubt about it. But for as long as I've been there, I've actually watched this evolve, because there was a time when the request was, it's snowing, let's bring the kids into a conference room. And when you are 6,000 people, you cannot have children in a conference room for their own safety. I mean, even the take your child to work day became a little overwhelming. But, great example with the snow, with all due respect to the school systems. I see the hand raised in the back. We see the forecast when Greg Fischel says snow is coming. I just, it's like batten down the hatches. How are we going to deal with this? But we've actually evolved to a place where we say, we're not closed. The customer has to be handled, so our call center can now open virtually. So we say to everyone else, stay home. And you have the ability to work from home. So work from home if you can, and if you cannot, then you take a PTO day, use PTO. But that has become much more flexible, because I really do think all of this is about flexibility and seeing the entire person, regardless of what the demographic is, in terms of age and place in life and children or no children and all of that.
Right. And we certainly heard the flexibility come through loud and clear in the research, as Rich discussed. Yep. I want to pick up on something else you said, Fara, earlier, which was really around sort of the workplace culture. And so it's one thing to offer these types of benefits, and then it's another for people to feel comfortable to actually take advantage of them. And so that seems to me one example of perhaps some of the challenges or bumps that you might encounter as you do this. And because we don't want to just paint a shiny, pretty picture, and help folks understand what are some of the other challenges that you might have come across as you were implementing and you, SEPI, and then for Andy, since you came into this, as you were doing your research, perhaps there are things that you also have come across. SEPI, do you want to start first?
So the question is, again,
were there any challenges that you encountered in beginning to provide more flexibility or any of the other benefits that you were extending to your employees?
Yes, the challenges that we encountered were what was in the research earlier. The single adults, single young people did not care for a lot of benefits that the company is spending, family-friendly hours, and towards when we were considering paying more for the family insurance, that became an issue because they were feeling like they are being something that company's profit is going towards a group that has a family and we're single, and why should we be exposed to that? So the main part that we have had challenges has been with folks who don't have children or elderly care or other people that they have to support. So it was hard to get them to understand and empathize. So that's why at the beginning I was talking about building a case for a bigger case for them about the world and about the society and about the community. So it's an ongoing conversation we have to make sure that they are looking at the big picture.
Yeah, I would actually agree. We really do try to speak to all the various components, training and development being one of them. And so there's childcare. We're trying to have conversation about the bigger picture. And it is difficult because depending upon what you are speaking about, you know, someone is not happy about it. So for example, we announced last year, after we did parental leave, towards the end of last year, we announced a scholarship program for employees' families. That should be exciting. But you know there is some noise about another thing. But you know, again, we always try to have conversation about and open up a dialogue and create a culture where people can say what they want, raise concerns, but ask questions. We have a very open social media platform in the organization. So some days it's harder to deal with than others, but we do have people who will tell us what's on their mind. And we try to address those in a very transparent way, and that allows, you know, more open dialogue to occur. And then we take suggestions. So I always have people who will say, well, what about this or that? And then we evaluate within the context of, is this something that will be beneficial to a broad part of the workforce? What's the cost of it? Even the parental leave, there was a cost benefit that had to be done to make sure that that made sense to expand it. So,
Thank you. Andy?
You know, I think, and there's a bit of a recurring theme here, that we get some of the older folks, some people that their kids are long gone, maybe their grandparents now, and they recall, you know, when it was uphill both ways to school through 3 feet of snow, and they didn't get time off, and why should anybody else? So I think, you know, and I think for whatever reason in the United States, and we're an Australian company, so we see what they have over there statutorily in terms of the statutory requirements, and certainly are familiar with what's happening in Europe, which tends to be, you know, a couple decades ahead of us. But for whatever reason in this country, we have this kind of Puritan work ethic thing that you got to have your phone in your pocket. If it buzzes, you got to compulsively look at it and do all these kind of things. So really, one of my more challenging audiences is, you know, some of the managers, line managers who have been around a while and seem to resent the younger folks if it does impact them. And I think that's why balance view is so important. But the other thing that we, and I, you know, again, curious for your thoughts, is we got a lot of fear of opportunism on the part of the employees, that we were going to be somehow exploited. You know, that if we gave somebody a leave that they could take in the absence of rigorous documentation around who this and that, you know, they were going to take advantage of us, et cetera, et cetera. It's simply not the case, and it certainly hasn't proven to be the case. It turns out that when you treat people like adults, you get adult behavior. When you treat people like infants and regulate their every action and when they have to be here and when they don't, you get infantile behavior and you're shocked by it. So that's been kind of a curious dynamic, I think, in my experience.
yeah.
So it sounds like the listening and engaging and open communication is a really key part of beginning to do this kind of work or expanding this kind of work.
And I want to add something to Andy's point about the culture in the United States that's focused on work. We have a group of our employees that have not been able to, sometimes they are not able to take all of their time off. And at some point, we decided to allow them to roll over 80 hours. So the purpose of time off is for people to take the time off. And then it was this major upheaval in 1 year that folks were saying, we want to get paid for all of the time that we're not taking off. So I was telling them, well, we can't encourage that because the purpose of time off is to encourage you to take the time off. So it became a major, actually, sticking point with a lot of our employees that I just said, no, we're not going to pay and we're not going to carry over more, forcing them to take the time off, which should not be a case, you think, for people to force you to take time off.
You know, we actually had a policy in place where they could accrue, spill up to 160 hours, and then once they hit that 160 hours or 4 weeks, anything that they didn't use, we would buy back from them, okay? So if you think about kind of the unintended consequence of that, and it quickly became this, is people were now economically incentivized not to take vacation. So we got there and we looked at it and we said, you know, this is, not only is it expensive, right, but it's the wrong thing. And so we said, listen, if you have 4 weeks vacation or 3 weeks vacation, take it. It's there for a reason. It's there for your own well-being. It's there for your health. take the vacation. But I don't take the vacation, you know. I'm too busy. Take the vacation,
Yeah.
figure it out. And so we just had our first full year under that, and it went really, really well. And with some planning, and it does take some planning to get, you know, far enough out that supervisors feel comfortable. And but if you open the dialogue, you can figure out a way to get your vacation taken, it turns out. So.
Great.
I have a really funny story to share about that. So we feel exactly the same way, and we have the same policy where you accrue a lot of time, and you can carry over 80 hours, and that's always been the case. So a couple of years ago, there was a really, really big, I want to say it's more than 5 years ago, very, very difficult year. Many, many people were saying, can't take it, and everyone was sending me lists of all these people that we really needed to figure something out. And some of my colleagues are giggling because they know exactly this story. I personally had this brilliant idea that I said, we should just this one time pay out the balance. No, wait,
Just
you're going
this
to be
once.
shocked at what happened. My assistant said to me, bad idea. And I said, but everyone will love it because they always say they want money, they want the money. So we did it. We did it that year and paid it out. I got hate mail about cashing out this PTO because so many people, because I've cashed it out all. There was nothing to carry over. I think you could carry over 5 days instead of 10. So many people were upset simply because they got used to having the year begin with the 10 days and then be able to take some more. So essentially what I did without realizing it, and it wasn't when I say I did a team of my team members. We're all, that was the lesson learned, is like, please don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Let's all really have this good dialogue. But there was so much frustration that year that I will never, now they come to me and say, let's cash out. I'm like, no, never doing that again. Bad idea. She's laughing, she knows.
So I'm going to bring it back to Napoleon, who has been very patient. So as you're thinking about our future workforce, what do business leaders really need to know when considering family-friendly practices?
So I'd start by saying that, you know, I think the family forward and see approach of engaging business as the primary sort of leader around this makes a ton of sense. That's part of the answer. But we know that the best workforce strategies, like, are business-led. Like, we know that those strategies that are best adopted, have the highest, you know, sort of level of success, are all business-led. So to the extent that you all are wrapping, you know, kind of like these initiatives around the needs of business, I think that's great. So I just want to get that out there. From a trends perspective, you know, right now I mentioned this a little bit earlier, right now we're looking at 3.7% vacancy rate, a little over 4% unemployment. We have a very tight labor market, an extremely tight labor market. Everyone is competing for talent. You talk to economic developers, I recognize a few of them in the room. You talk to economic developers about, you know, what are the priorities, what are the things that are holding you up when you're trying to grow, or, you know, you're trying to expand workforce. And, you know, their top items, in many cases, you know, folks are going to talk a little bit about housing, like the non-sort of incentive stuff. They're going to talk a little bit about housing. They're going to talk a little bit about, you know, health access and some stuff like that. And then it's going to get back around to childcare always comes up, which I think that's been part of the conversation before, but not as centrally as it is now. I think Governor Cooper's strategy around, the governor's strategy around childcare, potential childcare tax credit, could help alleviate some of that. But I just say, I think that part of what we want to make sure that the business community knows is that it really is going to require their leadership in moving this forward, and it is very beneficial for them. It sounds like everyone here already gets that, but there are other folks, other business communities, some that we engage with around workforce, where they're still trying to figure this out. And so making sure that we have kind of the right resources in place to be able to support them, we think is critically important. And we'd say to them, you know, as folks are thinking about this, they should obviously be thinking about you all as a resource, but we also want to be a resource within DWS, the workforce system, to make sure that we're delivering value to them.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, we're looking forward to partnering with all of you, and thank you so much for participating today.